Hi, everyone. Welcome to Progressive HR Live. I'm here with Kyle Borgardt, who is with Paylocity. And today we're going to be talking about work and our ever-changing landscape. So how our culture is changing, how work attitudes are changing, and what is the next move. So anybody who is joining now, please go ahead. Let us know where you're joining from and who you are in the comments. And we're going to do a little introduction here, and then we'll get moving into our questions. Hi, Kyle. How are you?
I'm doing well, Coreyne. Thanks so much for having me on here. Appreciate it.
Could you explain a little bit about your role at Paylocity at current?
Yeah, so I've been with Paylocity 4 years now. I've worked in the industry about 8. I'm coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin. I work with our clients in this area as well as helping prospective clients that are going through an evaluation to kind of show them what Paylocity can do, how we help our clients, and determine if it's a good fit for their organization, if we might be able to partner together and help them out.
Yeah, I love core HCM and payroll HCM. A lot of people think that payroll is probably one of the more boring of HR functions, but I think it's pretty darn sexy and pretty darn cool.
It's one of those things where as long as it goes well, everybody's a big fan of it. But when there's problems, that's usually when I start getting some phone calls. So try to keep it running smoothly. And really the interesting thing about it is when we talk about HCM and payroll, and while our name is still Paylocity and we do handle payroll for our clients, there are so many different components that factor into it, from how we recruit employees to how we onboard them to how we conduct performance reviews, administer benefits, train our employees, offboard employees. All these different things that historically have been done in many different systems are now able to be done from one single database where all that information can be shared and flow back and forth, and ultimately create a better experience for administrators and employees.
Yeah, and that's the future of work, is creating better experiences for everyone. I truly believe that. So if you're just joining now, this is Progressive HR Live. I am Coreyne Woodman-Holoubek, your host and founder of Progressive HR. I'm here with Kyle Borgardt of Paylocity. And if you're just joining us, let us know where you're joining from, who you are, and throw maybe some comments in the stream. So Kyle, to repeat, where are you joining from today?
Madison, Wisconsin. If anybody's familiar with the area, I'm over on the west side, kind of by Blackhawk Church. So my wife and I, Alex, moved into this home a few years ago. It's perfectly situated for us between both of our parents, and mine in Racine and hers in Dodgeville. So the eastern and western side of Wisconsin, we're right in the middle. So it's a good spot to call home.
And I'm coming in or streaming from Southwest Wisconsin, so like the Verona area, not Verona, Italy, but Verona, Wisconsin.
Funny when you type that in, how that pops up sometimes.
I know. Very, 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 very Shakespearean. So we have a few people joining us now. Wanted to say, okay, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, I don't think, but Yurgita from London. Hi, Yurgita. And then we have Jen Rose from Waukesha. Hi, Jen. And Jen, of course, says, go Badgers. Oh, all right, everybody. We're going to get into our first, I would say not our first question, but our first discussion point. And if you do join, we'll go ahead and pop your name and where you're joining from in the comments. We'd love to say hi. So Kyle, one of the things that we teased is that we were going to talk about is the changing workplace and labor market landscape as we return to work. I'll just ask, what are your thoughts on this?
It's something that is obviously shifting quite a bit, and really the pandemic over the last 15 months has accelerated a lot of the changes I think we're going to start to see. And part of it, stems from the pandemic itself, where when people were unsure what was happening, as a natural reaction, you tend to stay with what you know is safe. If you have a stable position, you're really not going to rock that boat with all the other uncertainties going on in the world. So one of the things that's being talked about quite a bit right now is this coming wave of resignations, and it's been kind of coined or termed the Great Resignation. And it's basically saying, with all the past 15 months, with all those people that were sitting tight because of all the uncertainties in the world, we're going to start to see more people naturally exploring options or naturally putting in their notice to go start their own business or things like that, as as the world starts to return to this new sort of normal that we're falling into, they're going to feel a little bit more confident and bullish on taking that leap. I've talked to folks multiple that have left stable positions for various reasons to go find something new without having that next thing lined up, which 15 months, 12 months ago we weren't going to see that. So it's really putting a lot of pressure on employers as well that are already struggling to find help in a lot of situations. Talking with my clients, there are more open positions at more organizations than they've had in a long time, and they're really struggling to find those people. But at the same time, kind of being cognizant of, we need to make sure we're retaining those folks that are with us as well.
Yeah, that's really important. I was listening to CNN yesterday on Kate Listener's show. She is the renowned expert on remote work, and she said 80% of the workforce say that they want to have a combo of work from home or remote work or hybrid. And a third of the workforce says that if they don't receive that, they will quit and go to another job.
Yeah, and that's kind of the second factor playing into this great resignation, right? Is not only all the people that would have just over the natural course of time gone on to find new opportunities, but also all these other folks that have spent the last year plus working from home, grown accustomed to it, grown to like the work-life balance. Well, there are challenges with it. I feel like a lot of people have adapted to it and seen some benefits from it. And really, from most of the surveys and studies that are being put out there, majority of the workforce is looking for some sort of hybrid work model, whatever that might be, right? So that is going to be kind of the second wave. If people are being forced to go back to a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 kind of situation, there are going to be a percentage of folks that start to look for other opportunities where they can work either remotely or in some sort of hybrid model. That's going to kind of throw some fuel on the fire of the retention strategies for a lot of HR departments.
Yeah, and so we have a lot of organizations like Amazon, Google, and Buffer, to name a few, that are coming up with these new programs, these new ways of working. And there's a company, I believe, it's Grammarly, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Grammarly is a smaller tech company. And they've even went so far as saying that they're going to be a remote first hybrid model. So, so actually taking all these ideas and putting together in like something that they coined themselves. So what's your idea on that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because obviously they're in an industry where they have that opportunity, right? So like that's first and foremost, is not every organization is going to be able to have that kind of flexibility where they could go to a remote work environment. For instance, like if you're in a retail setting or the service industry or manufacturing, right, you have to have people there to a certain degree to assist customers, manufacture goods, etc. So companies that have that ability, though, that's really where I think they're going to start to see more stress from those employees on being like, why do I have to be here? And really, I think it was Morgan Stanley, or it was one of the larger organizations that were starting to look at not necessarily when you need to be in the office, but what you're doing dictates when you're going to be in the office, right? So, to go back to the Grammarly thing, they can probably do 99% of what they need to do with a good internet connection and a laptop, right? But it comes back to, am I going into the office to create, something collaborative, a brainstorming session, group meetings, even if it's just camaraderie and team building is going to be a reason for a lot of those in-person events now. But there's no reason for me to drive 30 minutes or get on a train for an hour to go sit in an office and check email. So that's really where, again, looking from the employee side, they're questioning, like, do I need to be here to do this? And I think there's still a little bit of a disconnect from the employers that are looking at it from a time block standpoint rather than an activity standpoint.
And then it also seems that we're seeing is kind of like an East Coast versus West Coast kind of competition going on. So like Silicon Valley is like, go ahead, work from home, work remotely, work at hybrid work. And then you have the East Coast, like the New York City banks are saying you all have to come into the office by September. So
yeah, and I think it was just this morning I was reading about it again. Like JP Morgan came out that they're requiring everybody that comes back to the office to show proof of vaccination, which that EEOC ruling was huge, really, to help. I quite frankly was kind of shocked by that it was such a definitive ruling, right? So many times we get these things and it's kind of a guidance, but they don't really tell us what we can or can't do. But for them to come out and say that we can, as employers, require proof of vaccination, was really kind of a big step, I think, from a hard stance. Yes, you can do this. Now, there is still, obviously, how do you track it? How do you store that information? Because again, we're bordering on HIPAA compliance, right? So how do you document that? Who has access to it? Who can see it? And how's it stored and tracked is a whole nother component of that as well.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. So I'm going to go back to our comments here, and we did have Ivy joining us from Madison. Hi, Ivy. How are you doing? So just wanted to say hi before we go into our next question here. So I wanted to see here. Okay, so how have work attitudes changed, and how are organizations pivoting, from your opinion, from your standpoint?
This is something that as an organization, we've been talking about for a long time, even leading up to the pandemic, with trying to understand trends and how people are going to work, not only, today, but 5, 10, 15 years down the road as we're continuing to develop our software. And, one of the big things that we recognized was we were anticipating seeing this kind of shift as technology continued to grow, where there was going to be more opportunity to work from home or work from anywhere, or hybrid remote work, whatever you want to call it. So how is that going to affect the employee as well as the administrator? And really what it's come down to in the last, again, 15 months sped up a lot of that process. It pressure tested it. And really what we're seeing is organizations have seen the productivity maintain or increase in a lot of cases over the last year. So it's how do we continue to provide that flexibility for the employee, but also put more accountability to them. So, I think we're going to see really a shift in performance reviews and performance management and how we approach that. It's already starting to shift where employees are craving more of that consistent feedback rather than the one time a year kind of feedback. But what I also think we're going to start to see is more specific accountability for positions that haven't seen it in the past. I'll use the example of an accountant versus a sales rep, right? A sales rep has always had a lot of autonomy to go out and do whatever they want. They're often in their car, driving around, meeting with clients, doing their thing, not necessarily seen that much in the office, but they have a hard metric, i.e. their quota that they're expected to achieve. And that's how their performance is measured, is based on that quota. In past, we haven't seen the same specific hard numbers or metrics put on your typical accounting role. I think we're going to start to see more of those accounting type roles. And again, I'm just using that as an example. It can be anything that hasn't necessarily had those hard metrics tied to it, where we're looking at productivity, we're looking at error rates and different things that can actually be measured regardless of where an employee is, that can then be indicative of their performance. The challenge with it and what comes up after this is, are those people still given a fair opportunity for advancement within their organization if they're not there? And I think this comes back to a broader shifting in perspective, and a lot of it comes back to the multiple generations that are in the workforce today. I think we're going to continue to see this trend, but I also feel like a lot of folks that are in leadership positions still have that value on that face-to-face connection, because that's what they've worked in for the last 20, 30 plus years, right? So as we see the younger generation come in, I think we're going to see, again, the uptick of that performance-based metrics, hard numbers, measuring productivity, measuring error rates, and things along those lines, versus I like Coreyne. I see her every morning when I get my coffee and we have a great conversation. I think she should be our next leader, right? But meanwhile, employee ABC is at home. Her metrics may be higher, but so how do we balance that out, and how are we cognizant of it as we're doing that as well?
And to your point, I know that there's a number of different, not a lot, but there's a few organizations that are playing around with the shortening of the work week. So going to a 4-day work week, or even a 4-day work week with 6 hours. So 4 days, 6 hours rather than 8 hours. And the number one outcome, or the reason why they're doing that, is because of productivity. And they say that really, if you give people less time, they're going to use their time more efficiently. So organizations that are experimenting with this are Wildbit and Buffer, and they've been doing this for years now. And they say that it really cuts down, if you think about it, a lot of what's going on in the office is interruptions. And people are okay with that because, there's this idea that if you get interrupted, then it starts a collaboration. But at the same time, do you really get the work done? Do you really get that output? Or are you just sparking ideas that you could actually just work on at another time? Another point that they're making is that there's a lot of time that employees, because there's not a lot of time in the week and people have very busy lives, that they're doing non-work activities at work because they don't have any other time to do them. And so given a shorter work week, we can get work done because we don't have any outside distractions.
Yeah, and honestly, I think part of this too, what is ultimately spurring it is when we look at the younger generations, the Gen Z, the younger millennial generations, and then even Gen Z coming behind Gen Z, they grew up with this idea of a side hustle, right? So this idea that yes, I work, but I also have this side hustle thing. Everyone's side hustle is what they're probably more passionate about because they view that as a way to eliminate their 9 to 5, if you will, and that kind of flexibility is something that employers are going to have to continue to compete with because that's going to continue to grow. And I think especially as we see these younger generations come in, it's something that they're very cognizant of. It's very different than, and I'm not going to, the baby boomer generation, if you will, where you go, you get your college degree, you work your 9 to 5 for 30 years, get a pension or a 401k and retire. And the younger generation is going, well, I don't necessarily want to do that. I want to have the flexibility to say when I want to go do these things. And obviously recognizing that you still have metrics and goals and things you need to do to perform your job, right? Like they want that flexibility because some of them say, well, I'd rather work at 10 o'clock at night, right? Like that's when I feel most productive. I don't understand that, but some folks do it in organizations. And again, not every organization can have that kind of flexibility, but when you can, that can be a huge, huge bargaining chip for you to actually go out and recruit and potentially find some additional talent. I was just going to say it's something that at Paylocity, even pre-pandemic, we were always big believers in where, I remember my very first training, our CEO came in and talked and I asked him, I was like, well, we've got a few offices across the country, but I was like, are there plans to expand into more regional offices? And he goes, well, no, not at this time. And this was 4 years ago. And I was like, okay, why? And he goes, well, if I give you a phone, a laptop, and a printer with a good internet connection, you can do your job from anywhere. And then I can go recruit the best implementation consultants, the best account managers, the best service people from anywhere in the country, rather than saying I'm going to put an office in Chicago, Illinois, and then I'm trying to find the best people in Chicago, Illinois. So it's also about broadening the horizon to open up that talent pool a little bit more for your organization as well.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I think that, and especially as we're going into this really great, huge shift in people's interests in work and what would we call, we talked about this earlier on, is the great resignation or the great career shift. I was reading yesterday that Prudential and Access brought up the great talent migration as another spin on what's happening. And they also called it the career change tsunami. And they said that about 53% of American workers want jobs in new industries. People want to do different things. They don't just want to sit and plug away in an office all day long. And they want to be able to have the flexibility, whether it is to learn something new or to work on their own terms.
Yeah, and like that's interesting from a number of different perspectives. I saw that same article, I think, and even looking at like they're seeing a big shift from manufacturing to like the restaurant and service industry, right? Because that industry now is clamoring for help as they're starting to come back. They're struggling to find people. The pay is getting more competitive. Where it was talking about how we're actually seeing comparable pay between that service industry and manufacturing, where historically manufacturing has had significantly higher pay, which has attracted more workers to it. So it'll be interesting in that dynamic to see, how much does automation help replace some of those employees in the manufacturing process to enable them to go find other things in the service industry that need that human element to it. But it's also from the technical side where we're seeing people that are shifting and moving into roles that are more tech focused, where maybe they need to learn how to code, but they've never learned anything about coding before, right? So how do employers then provide the resources to help educate and train that employee? Not only, obviously, there needs to be a base level for them to perform the job, but then to continue to grow and expand in that role. That's a lot of pressure and a big ask from a lot of employers to be able to provide, that kind of in-depth training for employees to help them advance their career. But the ones that are able to do it are going to see, I think, a big benefit from, again, having more applicants, being able to sift them down and find the best fit for your organization, but knowing that there's going to be some pressure on it, and also knowing there's a good chance that in 3 to 5 years they're going to want to go try something different too.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your, you also mentioned tech tools. Is like, you got to have the tech tool access. You have to provide that employee experience. You have to provide that opportunity for communication and development. And that kind of leads us into our next part, or our next segment of this conversation, is how is Paylocity supporting HR and organizations during this move to Next? And I know that you're going to show us a few things that Paylocity has in their toolbox here.
Yeah, and I guess to really kind of kick off this portion of our conversation today, and something that I was really proud of. I obviously love Paylocity. It's been a great organization to me, and seeing how they've helped our clients. One of the things that we did last year during the pandemic, as we kind of saw this shift, where really over the course of 2 weeks, anybody that was able to work remotely went from in office to working remotely. And we went through the same thing with a lot of our folks that were in our offices. And we recognized that we were utilizing two of our tools more than we ever had before. And that was our survey tool and our learning management system, primarily because we needed to check in to see how employees were doing with the transition. But then we also needed to train and educate our employees on some new things that they may not have had to deal with before when working from an office. So that was something that we were using more than ever. It was something that we immediately turned on for all of our clients to start utilizing as they were dealing with that shift. But really, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here if that's all right, Coreyne.
Yeah, I'm ready.
One of the big things that we really have seen over the last year is the importance of communication. And what you're seeing on my screen now is I'm actually logged into my Paylocity database. And again, we do use our own software, which, as logical as that may seem, is not always the case in our world. And what we're looking at is what we are calling our community feed. And basically, this is an internal news feed for your organization. And this is where employees can come post questions. So you see, we have a new hire here who's asking about mileage reimbursement, how you get set up on that. We have another colleague of mine is hosting a webinar, and again, has questions on it. So this is something where it's a tool for employees to come post it, get answers to things. It's also something to recognize, like it's Christine's birthday today. She was one of my mentees, so I'm just going to drop her a quick note and say happy birthday. But this also flows in things where we're going to see our peer-to-peer recognition. So that kudos, job well done. This all flows through this one tool. And really the idea behind this used to be something that was shared directly peer-to-peer. But by having it out here now, it's something where we're able to kind of ride the coattails of that positive momentum. SHRM has always talked about 1 minute of recognition yields 55 minutes of productivity. So how can we spread and enhance some of that 55 minutes of productivity? Well, let's let everyone else see who's being recognized and why for the job.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, Kyle. Could you actually expand your screen a little bit so we could see a little bit closer?
Sure. Sorry about that.
There we go. Oops. Perfect. Thank you.
So this is an example of impression. So Dave received an impression from Coreyne. Just thanks for being the speaker on our team presentation. You did a great job. It was awesome. And these badges are customizable by organization. So you put your core values in there, your company logo. And this is something then that employees can do either from their desktop or through the mobile app. But we also, over here on the right-hand side, we have these what we call pinned announcements. And this is where we can actually come in and view that. And this is basically something coming from the top down rather than the bottom up. And that's really the important part about this tool, is that it can be a two-way communication. So for instance, here is our news that came out this week. So we have, return to office survey. So anybody that might be going back to the office, another reminder, hey, this was launched, please take the time to do it. The other component that is huge of this is video. And this is something that is built right into the software. You can record yourself just with the click of a button. Anytime I go to create a post, I can click this, add my own video. It won't let me right now because I'm already using my camera and my computer, but you can record yourself, record your screen. It's a quick and easy way to share information. But really the idea behind this is it's asynchronous video. And what we mean by that is it's something that I can record now, share it with you immediately, but when you have the time to go consume it, much like an email, you're able to come in and view the video. But rather than the static kind of format of an email, you're able to get tone, expression. Sarcasm lands a lot better on videos than it does on emails. So it's just different things like that. The other component of it, though, is it's not just about getting questions answered. Like you can see here, we have our Ask HR question and answer group, but it's also about connecting employees with each other. So this is something that I enjoy barbecuing and smoking meat and grilling on weekends. So I'm in this barbecue enthusiast group, which has connected me with folks all across our company. So Brian is looking at getting a smoker, and he asked, what do you guys think? Which one is better? And it led to this conversation, with a number of different folks. Oops, I closed those out there. But it's really, I haven't personally met most of the people in this conversation, but I recognize them because every weekend we're sharing pictures and chatting through here, and we have that connection, even though we aren't physically in the same office, right?
And so, back to your point is what earlier on when we were talking about collaboration and inter-office collaboration, and one of the issues that you brought up was that, are we going to have this kind of separation between people that are in the office and people that are outside of the office? Because the people that are outside of the office won't be seen. And I look at this as a way for people that are outside of the office to participate, to be seen. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about work.
Absolutely. And it's also recognizing, I'll put myself in a little bit of a spot here. So you can see this is all the activity I've had on our site. So I've awarded impressions, I've received impressions. One of the interesting ones is I made a post, and it was a while ago, so I'll probably have to scroll back quite a bit, where I shared, I think it was this one. I shared a picture in our barbecue enthusiast, and it was at, I don't know, 9-10 o'clock on a Thursday morning. And our president commented, looks great. And it's one of those things where I had a moment of panic. I was like, oh God, should I be posting pictures of my barbecue at 10 o'clock on a work day? But rather than getting in trouble, it was that recognition of there are going to be those moments where we're not robots that are working 8 to 5 constantly on that entire time. It's recognizing the human being behind the role and the position and connecting with them on that human level, not me worrying about, am I going to get in trouble for posting a picture of barbecue ribs on a Thursday morning, right?
I love it. I love it.
But yeah, this is a great tool. I love it. I'm in here all the time. Like yesterday, I think it was yesterday. Nope, it was more than it feels like yesterday. It was June 18th. I was looking for a specific format for our logo for a charity event where we're doing some sponsorship, and posted this up here, get the answer. Here's where I can go to get all the logo and usage guidelines and information that I need. I would have had no idea where to even start to find that information if I didn't have this tool. I would have emailed my boss. He would have had to email his boss, who would have reached out to someone else, and then maybe gotten back to me with someone to reach out to in marketing. Instead, I just go into our sales marketing channels group, post it on there, I get an answer in a matter of hours, right?
So I know that you mentioned this before, but I wanted to go back to it because I think it's really important. What is the importance in our digital world and in our world of hybrid work and collaborating in a remote hybrid work from anywhere workplace? What is the importance of asynchronous communication?
I mean, first and foremost, it's the tone that's coming through it, right? But really, I think the best example of it was, and I should see if I can find some of them, but when COVID first hit last year, rather than getting email messages from our CEO was posting short 2, 3, 4 minute videos at first every other day, probably. And it's waned over time, but it was really this idea of just communicating with your employees to let them know what's happening, even if that means it's just letting them know, I don't know what's happening, but having that come through in a video rather than a written email has been huge because as he's talked in numerous places about it, his average open rate on an email, if he were to send it to all employees in the company, is around 10 to 15%. But when he puts out a video, he's getting 75 to 80% of the organization watching his video. So it's about the reach, right? And it's about communicating with people in the way that they want to communicate. And really, when we look at something like community and we look at the younger generations coming into the workforce, this is how they get their news, right? They get their news from, whatever social media they're using or things like that, but they are used to scrolling through a news feed. They're not picking up a newspaper and reading articles. They're used to going through a news feed where when they stop, they can click on a video, watch it, and then keep scrolling or move it on from it, right? So it's about communicating with people in the way that they want to receive that communication so that you can get your message out as effectively as possible. And video just cuts through more than written word. And I think the best example is that look what you see on your social media feeds now, your LinkedIn feed or your Facebook. It's all videos are driving majority of the posts now.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate I appreciate you letting me interrupt you. So, okay, back to the demo then.
No, and really the interruptions are great. I always tell clients when we're going through a demo like this time is yours. So I'm usually just responding to questions and going into different things. So that definitely helps. The other piece is just providing a resource in a place where employees know to go. Like, again, if I have a question, I know I can go to the community. There's going to be a group. I can ask those questions, get those answered, but also empowering the employee. An employee doesn't want to have to fill out a paper form, scan it, email to request time off. They'd rather come into a mobile app, say, I want to take some time off. I want to see my balances. I want to select which one I'm going to use. So if I'm going to use vacation time, I'm going to take 8 hours, 1 day off. My 78 balance goes down to 70. I hit submit and it's done. I can see the status of it. I can see once it gets approved. If I'm a manager and I need to approve them, I can do it right from my phone as well, where I just go in and click approve. It's simple little things like that that are going to make the employee feel more empowered. It's not going to be a pain in the butt for them, but it's also going to eliminate quite a few administrative burdens as well. The other piece that I think is really big are the two that I touched on before in surveys and learning management systems. And when we look at a survey tool, really the idea and concept behind this is rather than make assumptions on what you think your employees want, especially as we're looking at how are we going to approach this hybrid, remote, back to office, whatever that might be for your organization, whatever route you want to go, it still is going to go a long ways to actually hear directly from your employees and look at those numbers statistically versus, well, I talked to Bob at the water cooler and Bob was all about coming back in the office. And well, yeah, of course, Bob was all about coming back in the office. He was already there. So it's not necessarily the truest sample size. And this is an opportunity where, at Paylocity, we custom build a lot of these kind of templates into the system, but then also give our clients the ability to build and create their own survey specific to their organization. Another big thing we did with this as I go into creating a survey here is we can either start from scratch or start from a template. So we'll just start with this employee wellness check. There is this ability now where we can also incorporate video into our surveys. So again, rather than just throwing a survey at them, put a video in here, explain why we're doing this, what we're trying to do. It's really this whole concept of just over communicate with employees, and the transparency from leadership helps build a lot of trust from employees, and also just feeling like you have a voice, knowing that you're asking for this information rather than just making decisions based on assumptions or information that employees may not know that you have, even if you do have it, but giving them that step of having the opportunity to make sure that they feel like their voice is being heard within the organization. The other big component and big thing that plays into this, like I mentioned before, is just a learning management system or a training tool, an ability and a way to communicate with employees. You can see here, I mean, I can start popping through all these different drop downs. There's a number of different courses that are going to be pre-built in here. But again, at the same time, having the ability to create your own original content, upload any existing training materials you have, building in quizzes, things at the end to help ensure that the information we're trying to get across is being retained by employees. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, building a training that is comprehensive, where you can use all these different tools in one spot. If it's a video embedded, if it's a video you recorded and created yourself, and then putting it in a way, in a format where employees can quickly and easily access it. So again, surveys can be answered from your mobile app smartphone. Learning management, your courses can be taken from your smartphone. I never thought I'm a full-blown geriatric millennial, right? Like, I remember answering machines with tapes in them and rotary phones where you dial them, but I also grew up with AOL Instant Messenger and cell phones in cars and things along those lines. I started doing my trainings from my phone because I can, do it as I'm getting ready in the morning, or if I've got 10 minutes on the couch and it tells me it's a 10-minute training or 20-minute training, I can pop in, do that, and just get it off my plate, regardless of where I am, regardless if I'm in front of a computer, right? And that is something to keep in mind too. And especially, like, we've seen our tools become more and more utilized in settings like manufacturing or food preparation, or areas and industries where not everybody has a corporate email address. How do we communicate information out to them? How do we get these different things out to them? If you can't send an email to a corporate email address, are you going to send your trainings to someone's personal email address and have that live there for them, where they can access it regardless if they're a part of your organization anymore? Or is it going to be stored in a secure cloud environment where, yeah, we can push this out, employees can still access it from anywhere, but you retain control over that information that in some cases can be proprietary, right?
So I was listening to a Josh Bersin podcast the other day, and he said the number one indicator of success of an learning experience system or a communication system for an organization, especially in their core HCM, number one key to success is being able to reach those employees that do not have email addresses. So we had not discussed this before. So I was very like, wow, Paylocity has this opportunity to reach your employees that don't have access to email via their phone and get them communication. Excellent.
And that's a big thing, right? Like, even if we think about, like, I've talked with like local businesses in the downtown Madison area where they have a high student body workforce. Like, their employees are, a lot of part-time employees that are students. The younger generations don't check emails the way you and I do, right? They're on their phone. Emails, they're going to have the red bubble of like 1,000 emails in it, which drives me absolutely bonkers, but they're fine with it. But what they do listen to is the notifications on their app. So being able to send a push notification, even if it's saying like, hey, this parking lot's closed today, or, we live in Wisconsin, Coreyne, like in January, like, we're going to get a snowstorm. There's going to be 12 plus inches of snow. Communicating out to your employees, hey, we're still open, or hey, stay home today, be safe, we'll see you all tomorrow, in a way that's quick and easy. And even disaster situations, if I hate to even mention this, but it's the world we live in. If we end up in an active shooter situation, or if a tornado, some extreme weather is in an area, being able to check in and make sure employees are safe. And while there is no quote unquote check-in feature yet within our community tool, it is something where you can instantly, in a matter of seconds, really send a communication out to all employees to have them communicate back their location, their safety to if it's to their manager, or even if it's just commenting on the post or liking the post, so we can, start to verify and make sure that everyone is in fact safe in those unfortunate situations that do arise.
No. And what else do you have? Or, I agreed. What I'm trying to I'm going over right what my tongue's going too fast for my head. So what else do you have for us in the demo?
The last kind of thing I wanted to highlight is really the shifting culture around performance reviews, right? And we talked about this a little bit already, where employees are craving more consistent feedback throughout the year rather than that annual kind of performance review. And this is something that Paylocity has worked on and had available to our clients for a number of years yet now, but we call them journals. And the idea behind this is I can come in and create a journal about myself at any time. Basically, like, hey, Kyle did a great job on Coreyne's webinar today. I want to make sure I want to include this on my performance review next year or this year, right? So I can just come in and create a note. But also from a leadership standpoint and from an administrative standpoint, we can create these different templates within it. So if it's an employee one-on-one, HR can help build these templates, which is then giving a manager a tool on how to have that conversation. Now, this could be a quarterly business check-in, monthly check-in, weekly, whatever your organization does. But this then allows us to document information, share information across the organization, but also then share it with the employees. So there's a plan going into that one-on-one meeting. A manager who maybe they're new to that managerial role, they haven't conducted one-on-ones before. They've been on the other side of the table for them, but giving them a guideline and a path to how to have those conversations. This becomes extremely important when we start looking at like disciplinary notices. So if an employee's, reached a threshold of attendance points and we want that manager to have a conversation with them, or they've been tardy too many times, etc. This is where we can start to document it. We can have that conversation with them, with the employee. Again, HR can help managers who maybe aren't comfortable having those conversations have them in a little bit better way, but then we can also share it with the employee. So again, if I'm a manager, this may be about someone else. So let's say Alex hasn't been doing the best in his role. I'm going to want to pull in Brad, who mentioned this to me, and maybe Benjamin as well. We can decide if we want this individual to be able to share this information or not. And even if we don't want to, we can also make it private so that only I can see it, and it's not going to go up the hierarchy within the organization. Ultimately, though, the real idea behind this is to get that more consistent feedback, have conversations around career planning, make that employee know that there's a path for development within the organization for them, and even doing things on the back end, then like building in succession planning, where we can start to look at utilizing things like a 9-box to determine who is on that trajectory to move into the next role, who are our future leaders, who are maybe some red flags that we need to be aware of. Maybe we're going to lose those individuals. Are we okay losing those individuals, or do we want to try to start working some corrective actions and get them over into like this core employee solid performer category? All of this is customizable for our clients. You determine what your 9-box looks like and what terminology you use in there. But at the end of the day, we're evaluating these individuals on what is their performance, what is their potential for growing within our organization, what's their risk of leaving our organization, and how ready are they for that next role. Where this all kind of rolls up, and obviously there are traditional annual performance reviews that can be built into this, or we can create goals at a company level and cascade them down, or employees can create their own goals and tie them up to company levels. We can request feedback from other individuals on certain people and determine if we want to share that information with them or not. But when we look at things like community, and we look at things like the performance journals and reviews, and really, even surveys has a big sentiment analysis piece built into it. But where Paylocity is ultimately starting to drive is understanding the sentiment of employees within the organization. So the more tools that are being utilized, the more information that's being shared on community is all going to factor into this employee sentiment score, where we can benchmark against other companies in our organization. We can see our participation rate, but then even seeing, what are people saying in all these different tools about our organization? Is it positive? Is it negative? Who's the most active on tools like community? What are they doing? Are they posting, commenting, etc.? And really just start to get a general feel for our organization and what's happening within it, what employees are saying, and then Not that it's a good or bad thing, but it's knowledge, and knowledge is power, and that gives us the ability to then continue doing what we're doing, improve what we're doing, or maybe we need to course correct and start looking at things a little bit differently. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes back to empowering employees to have a voice, and leadership being able to take that feedback and not just take it, but actually get it in a way that's consumable and actionable so that you can understand what's happening to then make better, more informed decisions down the road.
Yes, because we are going into a candidate market, and it is the experience that you provide for the employees and how the employees and how people working within your organization and tied to your organization are really, how they're engaged and committed to you.
Absolutely. And we talked early on about that great resignation that's coming in a lot of organizations, if they're not already being affected by. I think we're going to continue to see it over the next, really the remainder of 2021 here. You have to play offense and defense, right? Because a lot of organizations are growing and need more help. But at the same time, like, if you're filling up a bucket with a hole in the bottom, you're going to be filling up that bucket really fast. So we need to look at making sure we take care of the people we do have and we want to retain, and make sure we're putting things in place to help accommodate and make sure they're able to be the most effective. And that comes down to a lot of different things. That comes down to, in some cases, where they're working from. In some cases, it comes down to a path for development. One of the things that being on the older end of that millennial spectrum, we always used to be tagged as job hoppers. Well, what we ended up learning about millennials is they weren't really job hoppers. They just weren't seeing a path for development in the organizations that they were at, and they were being offered opportunities to advance their career outside of their current organization. So the frustrating thing for a lot of companies was they'd lose these people and they'd be like, well, we had a spot for you. We were going to do this with you, but it was never communicated to the employees. They had no idea about it. So it's that overarching, just open transparency from the top down and the bottom up that I think is going to put a lot of organizations in a great place to succeed in this new work environment.
And what are your thoughts on intelligent automation and how intelligent automation is going to be shifting really our job role structures into more of a project-based internal talent market economy?
It's going to be really interesting because it almost is going to start to lead to a lot of questions, I think, as to whether someone is an employee or an independent contractor, right? And being able to define, right, as we start loosening these concepts of work from anywhere, and you start saying, well, you can work at 8 o'clock at night, or you don't have to be here from 8 to 5 because the what you're doing is shifting in a way. Asynchronous communication has grown in such a way that we don't necessarily need to be here at this specific time. It's going to be, I don't know what's going to happen from it, right? And I think that's kind of what we're all waiting to see of, how much is that automation going to change what we're doing on a day-to-day basis? I don't think I know that answer yet. I don't know really what that's going to look like. But then ultimately, as we shift to, like you said, this project-based economy, traditionally, when we look at project-based roles, that's something that an independent contractor would be working on. So I do think we'll start to see a rise in that, because again, with the younger generations coming in, they're used to that kind of gig economy. They're used to, I'm going to flip on Uber and drive for a couple hours because I have that time right now. So there's a lot of possibilities out there, right? From, is there, is someone like Indeed shift where instead of posting job roles, they start posting project-based opportunities that then people can start applying for. It's also going to be a shift then when we start looking at it from the HR side, like how are employee benefits being affected by that, right? And is there going to be, as companies start providing more autonomy for quote unquote employees to go do these different things at the time they want, if they're not really employees anymore, are there going to be those benefits paid, and where are those coming from? And is that something that could, keep the younger generation more in the traditional employee-based role rather than like that independent contractor kind of role?
And so that's the big question. The big question is that, can you have a project-based economy and an internal talent market and still have an employment contract? So I think that's going to be something that we could necessarily say, we could add on to all these buzzwords of the great career change. We could say this is going to be the great employment experiment that we're going into.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, I think there's going to be a case that gets brought to one of the courts. How high it goes will be the interesting component of it. But I think we're going to start to see these blurred lines where employees are going to start to act a little bit more like independent contractors because of the technology that's available to them and the tools that they have. Where, I mean, a lot of people could sit on a beach in Mexico with a good internet connection and do their job from there, right? So
Exactly.
who is it from an employer standpoint to say, no, you need to be here? But, even from a more realistic standpoint, something that HR departments are dealing with today is, all right, you aren't living in Madison anymore. You're working from Wyoming or California. How does that change our tax implications, right? And being able to get that update and having a partner that can provide those resources and tools for them to make sure that they're staying in compliance. Like AI is going to have a big part in that, in automation, where is your employee updating their work location? Well, as long as we have that information, then we can start to figure out the proper taxability and things along those lines to make sure everyone stays in compliance.
Yeah, and I know that when we first connected and talked about Paylocity, I was very, very impressed with all the tax information per locality and per state that Paylocity had for their HR partners. So speaking about digital nomadism, and I wanted to say hi to our international audience really quickly before we go into our last question. So I wanted to say hi from Jasmeet, who's joining us from India, as well as Shakil from Pakistan. And then, of course, lastly, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, but Ayush from Nepal. So we've got a really international community here. Oh, so everyone, this is the last question, but if you do have questions for Kyle, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. Just DM him, just slide right into his DMs and ask him any questions that you have. So, and we might have actually just talked about this. What are the other trends that we could consider as we anticipate the big changes to our workplace and work markets and society in general?
I mean, obviously, like where people are physically doing their work is the biggest shift that everyone is aware of. But looking at like the dynamics of what a lot of when we look at, the primary core of our workforce has shifted to the millennial generation. Now it's skipped right over Gen X. So they kind of get the
Sorry,
raw.
Gen X.
They get just kind of left out of a lot of these things, but it went from baby boomers to Gen X. And when we look at, and again, like I'm going to talk about our stereotypical or things that a lot of people in that kind of phase of their life are dealing with, is they're in a unique spot where a lot of times they have an aging population that they're taking care of in their parents, right? And we're seeing, like, even in my neighborhood, I'm seeing more and more of it. I have friends that are multi-generational households where they're trying to help take care of their parents, but at the same time, a lot of these folks are also dealing with the conundrum of childcare. And during the last 15 months, childcare in a pandemic has been an interesting challenge, I guess we shall say. And it's something where, again, another industry that's really struggling to find help and support, which is resulting in fewer and fewer openings and options for childcare or elder care for that matter too. And a lot of that burden is being placed on your largest population in your workforce. Not always, right? There are going to be certain organizations that still skew one way or another, but generally speaking, the largest population is this millennial generation that is dealing with things on both sides of it. They're trying to balance the work in the middle of it. And that's why when we look at why there's such a demand for this hybrid work model, it's what we were talking about before, where it's this idea that I have things that I need to do as a human being, as a person, where I can only do them between 8 and 5. Right. And like the easy example is like, I need to do this right now. I need to go get my eyes checked. My eye doctor isn't open on Saturday mornings. My eye doctor isn't even open most afternoons because he's on the golf course, but that's a different story. So I need to find some time between 8 to noon to go to the eye doctor during the work week. That can be a real challenge for a lot of people, especially if it's, my eye doctor is close to my home, but I'm commuting an hour into the city to go to work. So really, I think the reason we're seeing such a big push for it is the largest population of our workforce is being pushed and pulled in so many different ways that they're recognizing that if I can get that, even if it's only a half hour commute one way to work, if I can get that hour back in a day to either A, take care of all the other things I need to take care of, or B, like quite frankly, for me, I finish my day at 5 o'clock. My commute is a 30-second walk up my stairs and my baby girl's running and screaming daddy, and that's my commute. And some people need that commute to decompress or whatever, but for me, before the pandemic, I wouldn't see my daughter until 6 o'clock at night, 6:15 some nights, and she goes to bed at 7 or 7:30. So for me to double the amount of time that I'm able to spend with my daughter, I have no problem coming back down at 9 o'clock and doing some emails or things like that. But having that extra time with her is invaluable.
No, and we talked about this a little bit before we went live. I was watching LinkedIn Live yesterday with Dan Roth, who's the CEO of LinkedIn, and Robert Downey Jr., aka Iron Man, Tony Stark. And he was saying how he's just like the rest of us, where he spent his time during the pandemic thinking about what he wanted in life. And he's making a very big pivot right now. And so he's going from being an actor, well, he'll always be an actor, to being a green investor. So he is partnering on a venture capital firm to invest in green businesses to help the planet and the climate. And he really said to everybody, just, open your imaginations to what it is you want in life and what are you doing and what is your purpose. And then, everything is going to be hybrid now. It is going to be a combination of what the work world needs and what you want. And then, of course, he made a plug for his new Netflix
Sure.
series, Sweet Tooth, which is all about being hybrid. So I just started watching that. So if you're watching this, go ahead and I think that's a good idea to watch some Sweet Tooth tonight. But to his point, he said hashtag this is working, hashtag hybrid reimagine it. And I'm really appreciative to yourself and Paylocity for being there to provide these new and innovative HR tools to organizations and employees as we move into the next for our workplaces. So thank you, Kyle.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me on. I enjoy always enjoy our conversations, and hopefully some other folks out there were able to enjoy it as well. But I'll just kind of to close things out. We as Paylocity actually had our complete brand refresh that was supposed to launch on March 16th of last year. And we hit pause on it because I always remember March 16th as kind of the day of COVID. That's when Wisconsin, where we live, kind of shut down. Everyone stayed home. No one went to the work that day really. And that was kind of the start of the pandemic for us. Also the day we were supposed to launch that new brand, we hit pause on it. And I think in hindsight, we kind of wished we hadn't, because our new tagline is forward together. And that's something that really, as we start to emerge from this pandemic, we're not saying that we've got all the right solutions today, right? We think we've got a pretty good one, but we also recognize that our clients are dealing with this, and we truly view them as collaborators and co-creators. And as an organization that owns our own software, we're constantly trying to get feedback from our clients on what we can do to be better. And that's really, to me, what we all can do as people, as employees, as husbands, wives, fathers, sons, daughters, mothers. What can we do to be better tomorrow? And together we're going to go forward. So forward together.
I love that. Hashtag forward together.
Absolutely.
So everyone out there watching, thank you so much for spending time with Kyle and myself today. I know that you guys are very, very busy and you have a lot of things that are pulling you. But I really greatly appreciate you spending time with Kyle and I here on Progressive HR Live. So you can contact Kyle Borgardt on LinkedIn, DM. I've been saying that throughout our conversation here, or at kborgardt@paylocity.com. And for me, you can follow me, of course, on LinkedIn or Progressive HR, or the hashtag Resourceful Humans on LinkedIn. But of course, I love you to DM me. So DM me about anything. I am here to answer your questions and to talk. So thank you again, Kyle, for joining me on Progressive HR Live. And thank you, audience, for joining as well. Thank you, Resourceful Humans. Go forth and have a fabulous rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Coreyne.
Thanks, Kyle.